Hi there, welcome back to Dialogue. Is it a tale of two Europes or more a divided States of America? It seems the Atlantic Ocean is widening since unprecedented policies such as the U.S. withdrawal from the Paris Climate Change Pact and the Iran nuclear deal have caused concern and confusion among its European partners. To decrease reliance on the U.S., France and Germany are vowing to pursue an independent foreign policy and national defense for Europe. China is a potential partner to strengthen cooperation, but the Belt and Road Initiative and the 1+16 plan among Central and Eastern European countries has caused the EU to be cautious about China's intentions. What consequences does Trump's style of governance have in international society? What is the state of the triangular relations among the US, the EU and China? And how should we evaluate China's further engagement in shaping the world landscape? To discuss these issues more, I'm very happy to be joined by Mr. Yuan Peng, Vice President of the China Institute of Contemporary International Relations. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. Welcome to Dialogue, Mr. Yuan. An article that you published in Global Times recently caused a splash among readers and netizens regarding what you call atypical United States of America. Now, it seems we should change the term and wording for that country. It should be divided States of America. Now, what do you make of your basic argument in the article?
This article, actually, the main content is talking about U.S. and EU relations. My focus is talking about how a divided America facing a divided European. What's the relations going forward in the future? My maybe it's not so accurate term, but my meaning is that today we actually face two different America, or two different the United States. One was represented by Donald Trump and his team. It's anti-establishment. Another America is a more establishment of the United States. This is in the political sense. In social sense, we can also see two different Americas. And ethnically speaking, we have minority America and WASPs America. And from the lifestyle, or mainly talking of a middle class, upper middle class, and grassroots and lower middle class, they are now divided. And even in the regional sense, we have regions which welcome globalization, like Northeast America and California, Western America. They both enjoy today's globalization trend. Wall Street and Silicon Valley and Hollywood, they benefited from today's globalization, while in the Midwest and Mid-America, which was mainly agricultural and manufacturing America, they are victims of today's globalization. So today's, in a word, I think today's America is divided into two different trends and two different America. And Donald Trump represented typical America.
What about a divided Europe?
Divided Europe, we can see almost the same story of the United States. Brexit, Great Britain representing a new Europe, while the Germany and France, which still holds to a unified European. So those anti-European and Great Britain types of Europe, and still hold the European as a one union, as another Europe. Even inside one single country, like in France, like in Germany, like in Italy, you can see two different trends: populist Europe and established Europe. While today the major contradiction and differences between Europe and the United States is that the mainstream or established European people think Donald Trump representing another trend of Europe, like Brexit. So they think Trump phenomena is not good for unified European Union. While unified European Union was valued by most of the established Europeans, that only if unified European can be a one pillar in the world. Otherwise, European is just organized by 28 different medium or small countries. They cannot afford a major power in the world.
But I'm afraid the United Kingdom is not alone. Britain has been joined one after another by Greece and Italy. If you look at the campaign success of the Northern League and the Five-Star Movement in Rome, the latest development in Italy threatens to change the political landscape of continental Europe, despite the negative impact of Brexit. Having said this, let's look at the position and policy of China. Whom are we talking to? Should we find ourselves talking more to President Trump or the establishment? Having said this, we all know on the issue of policy of engagement over the past 4 decades, there is a growing consensus between Democrats and Republicans, between President Trump and the establishment, that they should do more to restrict China's rise and global expansion. So given the sophistication of the current growing populism across the Atlantic Ocean, what should we do?
This is one new challenge facing China to deal with the United States. I think today we have to face two different Americas. On the one hand, we have to deal with Donald Trump and his team, because there's party in power, and the President Trump is the president of the United States, representing American political, force. So we have to deal with Donald Trump and his team. At the same time, we have to face another America, that is the party not in power, like Democratic Party, and those establishment. Those establishment America is still a base of the United States, which cannot be ignored. Take the current trade disputes an example, that actually China at the same time we face 3 different groups or fronts. The first represented by Donald Trump himself. Actually, he wants some concrete numbers. $50 billion, $100 billion trade deficit to please his grassroots supporters, middle class. He want to win this midterm election. Actually, it's not a trade war, it's a political war for him. Actually, at the same time, we face the second front, that is a mainstream or establishment America. They want China opening up financial service, security sectors to America. This is they want. They don't care too much on the trade deficit, the numbers. And at the same time, we have to face the third front, that is represented by Peter Lavallo, Steve Bannon. Those, they want to target Chinese core competitiveness. Made in China 2025. They want to make use of trade war, trade dispute to restrict the rise of China as a trend. So all those 3 are all unified in a single trade dispute. They are all America. Which is true America, nobody knows. The challenge for China is that we have to deal with all 3 different fronts simultaneously. That is a new challenge that we are now facing.
The next major issue, Mr. Yuan, is why do we have this consensus, unprecedented consensus shared by American elites and establishment, even between President Trump and elites, that they should bash China? What has made them realize that the rise of China will be a major strategic threat to the national interests of the United States?
After the new version of the National Security Strategy report was issued, we witness the so-called consensus in the United States to understanding and to deal with a rising China. The reasons behind that, I think, can be found in through different aspects. Number one, I think, is a power shift. This is the base. They think China's rise, China's now GDP surpassed 30% of that of the United States, and according to Chinese schedule and step, maybe sooner or later will go past 80% or even equal to the United States. So the first time in American history they take China as a peer competitor. Even Soviet Union, even Japan cannot boast it to be the so-called peer competitor. They thought China is the #1 peer competitor that America faced in history. This is the base for Americans' consensus to deal with China. And at the same time, the second reason, I think, that the strategic shift. From Chinese perspective, we see a very huge strategic shift of America. That is a shift from, geopolitically speaking, shift from the European Union to Middle East and then to Asia Pacific or Indo-Pacific. To in front of Chinese, we have to face directly and the daily base. Where from an American perspective, China now becoming more assertive. Belt and Road, going to Africa, going to Latin America is not a typical Chinese traditional strategy. Then both sides now face to face in Asia Pacific. We don't have enough historical experience to live together in this region, and we don't have enough mutual trust to find a new roadmap to deal with each other in this region. So both sides have some strategic suspicious of the other's intention in the region. So power shift, strategic shift, and plus one additional shift, that is environmental shift. Domestically speaking, that multiple interest groups hijacked the policy toward each other. Well, internationally speaking, the third parties like DPRK, like Japan, like Ukraine, Russia, Philippines, Vietnam, all those factors sometimes kidnapped U.S.-China relations. All those are new. So all those shifts happened in the same time, make the relations not the same as 20 years, 10 years ago. And both sides are get used to this new normal. And for at the same time, the United States today sometimes is because of its domestic problems, they are not so self-confident in dealing with this kind of a new situation arising in China. So they are a little bit overreaction, over-exaggerate of Chinese situation, and over-anxiety. This lead to American strategic circle to achieve some new consensus. And maybe one another special reason is that the recent Chinese new platform. We are now entering into a new era. In 2035, we want to be a modernized China. In 2050, we want to be a strong power. All this for American to see that China sooner or later will go past America being #1 in the world.
In their examination of the most consequential bilateral relationship, it seems elites in the United States, particularly policymakers, have been obsessively concerned with a few issues, like China wants to dismiss American power, discredit American democracy, and dismantle a world order that's constructed in the wake of the Second World War. And this sort of a perceived threat seem to prevail and pervade the policy-making circles in the United States. What do you have to say in response?
Those three Ds, I think, very typically representing today's American mainstream perception of Chinese perception of the United States.
Sounds like tongue twister.
It's my feeling, and my after my research and trip to the United States, my direct feeling like this. But my response to those kind of 3D sentiment to my American friends or American audience, my answer is that maybe if you think China has 3 Ds, I think America has 3 overs. Number 1 is over anxiety. It should not be that anxiety like today, because you're still number 1 in the world. You're still a superpower. See, your high tech, your military,
and soft power.
And soft power. So maybe it's over anxiety. Because of over anxiety, then you have the second over, then over exaggeration. Over exaggeration what China has done, China is doing. For example, you take some pieces from the overall reports by 19th Party's Congress. Rather than reading the whole context, you just dig some parts.
You mean some sentences have been taken out of the context and being exaggerated?
Over-exaggerated.
To serve their political purpose.
Yeah, and drew some wrong conclusion. I think China want to export Chinese model to the world. Because of China in the Party's Congress report, we mentioned that Chinese characteristics of socialism actually provide one option to those who want to develop themselves, while at the same time want to maintain independence. It's one option. If you take this sentence, from the whole context of Chinese 18th Party Congress report, we Chinese never drew this conclusion. We want to export model. Where most of American strategists got this kind of impression. I think this very typically used by my wordings, over exaggeration, I think. The third over, I think, is overreaction. Overreaction. Some normal actions made by China. For example, many Americans criticize Chinese passed the new NGO laws. I always mention Americans that don't forget, NGO laws just one of 100 new laws.
In other words, you encourage your American friends to adopt a holistic view about what China is doing to fine-tune its legislative framework.
Of course.
It's part of our national governance.
Yeah. If you want to know Chinese specific policy more accurate, you need to know a new era's China. You need to read all those documents. You need working much harder than before.
But excuse me, Mr. Yuan, I'm afraid that few Americans can afford or dare to step out and defend China's vision. They would be accused of being a pandahaga under such adverse circumstances because of the alleged growing consensus in the United States that China is rising so fast and its global impact will inevitably be a threat to American national interests scattered throughout the world. So it would be a security dilemma, won't it be? So we don't have any friends, we don't have any voices in the United States coming out to defend the legitimacy of China's global expansion. Right?
That is a very serious problem that we are now facing. The first time in my memory in the past 20 years, I think one specific reason is that the National Security Strategy report, which is released by National Security Council of the United States, which means the government lead the recent domestic debate on how to deal with China. In this report, they publicly labeled China as a revisionist country, a major competitor. Then those hardliners now surrounded Donald Trump. So government, the hardliners, and the very harsh reports shape a better environment to restrict a more open, more fresh debate. Then those moderate scholars or serious scholars, they hesitate to express, and they are reluctant to debate. then eventually those unbalanced and rational voice prevail. Those moderate, those sober rhetoric or arguments now has been restricted. So it's very hard to find a very friendly, very balanced dialogue and debate, both from the hardliners and the moderate from the United States and Chinese scholars. That's the problem we are now facing. I think it's a very, very bad thing.
Thank you so much. You are watching Dialogue with Mr. Yuan Peng, Vice President of the China Institute of Contemporary International Studies. We'll be back in a short while. Stay with us, please. Welcome back, Mr. Yuan. In fact, the structural and chronic mistrust between the two major powers, the United States and China, started way ahead of the what you call eruption of those major problems, such as the passage of the NGO laws and the keynote report by President Xi Jinping at both the 18th and 19th National Congress of the CPC Central Committee. In fact, it has long existed, the issue of mistrust. Taking a closer look at the domestic politics in China, I'm afraid we have to give more thoughts to the deep-rooted issues such as the rise of nationalism, self-inflation, quote-unquote. What do you make of the political landscape in our country? I mean, I know this is a both sophisticated and sensitive issue when we examine what's happening in China. Do we have a single voice? Do we have a monolithic voice regarding the bilateral relationship? We have the conservatives, the liberals, grassroots and elites. We have the military and the non-military segments of the society. The spectrum of public opinions in China is seriously divided as well. What do you think of such frustrations?
Thank you for this question. To be frank, I'm not the right person to talk about my own country, China's political and social change, because my research focuses on American politics and American foreign policy. But as a Chinese scholar, we're living in China. We witnessed radical change in the past decades of China. So my feeling is that today China is enjoying the best era in history. And as a whole, Chinese people just feel very proud of what has been achieved in the past 4 decades after Deng Xiaoping initiated the opening up and the reform. This is the general base. General base is that 1.3 billion Chinese people enjoy a better life. This is the base. And because of a better life, then different opinions, different voices happened given this. After we successfully resolve our food shortage and basic survival issues, now we began to thinking more. Then different voices happened, including those nationalists. And but the comparison with the European and the United States, which populism now prevail and more divided. And today in China, we enjoy a much better situation, because we all enjoy the situation today, which is not so easy to achieve. And we all think that we have to achieve a much better life tomorrow. So we don't want to waste too much time in talking those unrealistic things. This is a cultural difference between China and the Western world. Also, I think because of Chinese political system, social system is different. So we cannot judge which system is better. But we think today, Chinese think our system still fit our situation best.
It's very difficult to characterize the rise of nationalism as the majority tyranny in shaping our policy. But one example that we can look to is India, where Prime Minister Modi also faces nationalistic media during this current period of transformation or political reconfiguration. Having said this, Europeans also start to feel uncomfortable with the impact of a Belt and Road Initiative since we forged the 16+1 mechanism. Regular summit meetings take place to enhance our presence in Central and Eastern European countries, and we have made heavy investment in Greece. So European politicians in Brussels are afraid this is a divide and rule. This serves to undermine their consensus-building mechanism implied deeply in European politics. What do you think of their concerns with regard particularly to Belt and Road Initiative?
Yeah, we have noticed that both in European and American and the whole Western world has some potential worry about the real intention of Belt and Road Initiative. And the Chinese government also highly aware of that. So then we do some exploration and mutual, interaction and establish mutual trust to show our sincerity. And the first thing is that we need to have a better political relations with the European countries. I think after 2014, when President Xi visited the headquarters of European Brussels, after that, I think the European friends sense that China value European Union as a political pillar, economic pillar, and civilization pillar in the world, which is different from Donald Trump's America, which ignore EU as a whole. So from that day on, I think China-EU political relations today enjoys the best period in history. This is the base for talking about better road and other issues. From that day on, that today we see Europeans' attitudes toward Belt and Road, relatively speaking, still I think is very positive, because from the Belt and Road Initiative, they see the general attitudes expressed by this is in accordance with the Europeans' opinion, such as welcome globalization, rule-based and free trade, and investment on infrastructure and people-to-people exchanges. So all this is still European, value. It's not total. It's not different. While at the same time we see Trump's America, anti-globalization, not supportive multilateralism, and even free trade. It just want American first. Those comparisons made the European has their own judgment. That is, today's China can be embraced. Well, this not necessarily means that they accept every aspect of Chinese, statement or initiative. Also, like One Belt, One Road initiative. I think they are suspicious. Their worry is quite understandable.
Thank you so much. Whatever their disputes between Europeans and Chinese, there's one thing in common. They both stand for multilateralism in a rule-based world. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.